Good morning and happy Independence Day. After more than a year, the state of Georgia is now free from its public health state of emergency. Why? The governor says it was time. Plus, run, Herschel, run. Well, the former University of Georgia football great joined the field for the U.S. Senate. And there's another push to remove Confederate statues from the U.S. Capitol, including one from Georgia. Phil and Kathy are here, so are Martha Zoller and Bobby Capel. This is the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Thank you for joining us today. I am Claire Sims in for Lori Geary. Georgia's public health state of emergency officially ended at midnight Thursday, nearly 16 months after the state's first confirmed case of coronavirus.
I feel very comfortable making this move.
We spoke exclusively with Governor Brian Kemp just hours before Georgia's public health state of emergency was set to expire. Back in March 2020, the governor signed an executive order declaring a state of emergency because of the COVID-19 virus. The declaration gave the governor broad powers to respond to the crisis, and he says it was time to give that authority back. Data from the Georgia Department of Public Health showed a little more than 400 new confirmed coronavirus cases Wednesday, down from the state's peak of more than 6,000 in a single day back in January.
Our cases are down 92%. Hospitalizations remain below 500. At one point, they were all around 5,000, so we have a lot of bandwidth out there, so we don't need the public health state of emergency anymore.
Governor Kemp says at this point in the pandemic, Georgians know what to do to protect themselves. Get vaccinated, or for those without their shots, wear a mask and social distance. Scott Hogan, executive director of the Democratic Party of Georgia, released a statement in response to the end of the state of emergency, saying in part, as Georgia and America welcome the return of normalcy, we have the Biden-Harris administration and Democrats in Congress to thank, not Brian Kemp or a single Georgia Republican. Kemp and Republicans have failed Georgia at every stage of this pandemic, from contradicting public health experts in the reopening of our state to botching the vaccine rollout process.
Hogan went on to credit the American Rescue Plan with getting vaccines and recovery resources out to the community. Now, Kathy, there has been a lot of back and forth about who should get the credit, especially for vaccines during this pandemic. What do you think about that?
Well, first, let me just say, I think it's right that the governor ended the state of emergency. He's done very little to utilize the powers that he had available to him to curtail the epidemic here in this state, and so there's not really any point in continuing with that. As to credit, I'm not really sure anybody needs to take credit for battling something this awful, quite frankly. We all need to have hands on deck getting things done. What I do hope that the governor does, I'm hoping that this is not a signal that he's kind of done, because he has been significantly winding down his interest in this topic. But I think that, continuing to try to catch up, I think 10 points we're off from the national average of vaccines would be a worthy goal. We're still seeing lots of people getting infected with this new variant, and the sooner we can snuff it out, the better. So I'm hoping that even though he's stopped the emergency power situation, that he continues to focus on this.
Martha, you also interviewed Governor Kemp about this week. What do you think?
Well, I think that Hogan's comments were just so not rooted in reality. It's not, I do agree with Kathy, it's not one person's responsibility or another. It was all hands on deck, and certainly Project Warp Speed got the vaccine to us so that it could be distributed in the first part of the year. So there's credit to go around, but the governor has worked very hard to protect lives and livelihoods throughout this. And Georgia is doing much better, maybe not on the vaccine rollout, but on the ability for people to work and be a part and be able to support their families, and kids going back to school, all of that sort of thing. So, really, it isn't some time to take one person's credit or another. It is a time to say, hey, we got the vaccines created. We're getting them rolled out now. Let's all work together on this.
All right, thanks. Well, is he in or out? This week, former President Trump said Georgia football legend Herschel Walker would run for U.S. Senate and challenge Reverend Raphael Warnock. But Walker has only said that he's looking at the race closely and will make a decision soon. Phil, is he running out of time here?
No, he's not running out of time. I think that he's fully committed. As I said about a month and a half ago on The Gang, he is ready. He's suiting up, and I think he'll make an announcement sometime after Independence Day weekend. So I think he's got a place here in Atlanta, and I think he's put everything together. President Trump says that he's told him that he's going to run. And I think that he's going to obviously be a part of a Trump rally in Georgia down the road. The president's committed to doing a rally and of course, getting people excited for, can you believe it? Half a year is gone already now. And so we're gearing up for campaign 2022.
So, Bobby, there was a big fundraising deadline this week. What do you think about this Senate race? Obviously, Reverend Raphael Warnock has raised a lot of money already. Is Herschel Walker going to be able to catch up, you think?
Well, Claire, first of all, I apologize for my attire, but I'm in the mountains of Utah right now, and we're about to go whitewater rafting with my family after this, so please excuse the hat and any sort of lighting or audio issues. But it doesn't preclude me from talking about this Senate race. I'll say this. He would certainly start with huge name ID, specifically in a Republican primary. But I think that tying himself to Donald Trump, while it may work out well in a primary, would be fatal in a general election. There's also a huge learning curve for someone who's running for office for the first time to be jumping into a United States Senate race. To make an analogy here that would comport with Herschel Walker, it's like having a star running back on a high school football team jumping up and instantly starting for the Dallas Cowboys without doing one practice. So there's going to be fumbles, if you will, along the way. And we'll have to see if he can even hold up throughout a primary, much less getting into a general election. You spoke about the fundraising. I mean, Senator Warnock has already banked $6 million cash on hand right now. So he is ready to take his reelection battle, and he's tested. He just went through a tough race. And if you need to look at somebody who fumbled out of the gate, who hadn't run for office before, look no further than former Senator Kelly Loeffler.
All right, thanks, Bobby. And I appreciate the background. I think it shows a nice work-life balance here. We don't have a lot of time left in this block, but I want to get this in. This week, it came to light that the FBI is investigating former Atlanta mayor and current mayoral candidate Kasim Reed for allegations that he misused campaign money in 2017. Kathy, do you think that might have an impact on his current campaign?
Yeah, I think it will. I think that people are sort of giving him a pass right at the moment, but as we start looking more closely at all the candidates, I think the sins of the past administration, the many people associated with him that have pled guilty to various crimes, as well as these particular issues are going to come to the floor, and people have other choices that they can make rather than having a do-over of an experience that they've already had. I think that he jumped in thinking that he was coming from a strong position. It doesn't look that way now. I think this is going to dog him.
Phil, do you want to weigh in on that quickly?
Yes, I agree with a lot of Kathy's analysis, and I would just add that this is a federal investigation, and there's some very serious charges of him misusing campaign funds for all sorts of stuff, ranging from resort travel to purchasing jewelry and lingerie and things like that. And his attorney, Jeremy Berry, apparently is key. He's been subpoenaed, and we'll have to find out what he's going to be telling about all of this. But remember, a U.S. attorney said that Kasim Reed presided over a culture of corruption, and who wants to go back to that?
All right, thank you. And the I-Team will keep an eye on that. Well, still ahead, the U.S. House votes to remove Confederate statues from the Capitol. What that could mean for our state.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Members of the House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved a resolution Tuesday to remove all Confederate statues from the U.S. Capitol. That would include one from Georgia of Alexander Hamilton Stevens, who served as Vice President of the Confederacy. Bobby, is it time for this to happen?
Oh, this is wonderful news. The fact that 67 Republicans voted to expel these statues from the state capitol, or from the nation's capital, rather, is incredible considering the fact that you can't get 67 Republicans to vote with Democrats to agree that the sky is blue. So, yeah, this is obviously a step that probably should have been taken a long, long time ago. But bravo, I'm glad it's being done now. It's also a good time to redouble our efforts and remember how important it is that we work every day towards equality for all.
Now, you mentioned the vote, so I want to mention here that all of Georgia's Democratic representatives voted for that resolution, while Republicans voted against it, although Congressman Buddy Carter and Jody Hice decided not to cast votes there. Now, there has been talk for the last year or so about replacing Stevens with a statue of the late Congressman John Lewis, although legislation in the state capitol never really made it to the House floor. Martha, any thoughts on why that didn't move?
Well, I think it's as Bobby pointed out, it's difficult to get anything out voted on anything. John Lewis's death, it was not that long ago. I would not oppose that as being a replacement of the statue, although I think there are many other Georgians that could be considered for that. So, it's a tragic time, and I think this is the right process to go through. You don't want people tearing things down. You don't want vandalizing the property. You don't want any of that. What you want is the proper process going through. Now it's got to go to the Senate, and with the 50-50 Senate, I'm not sure what will happen there.
All right, we'll keep an eye out. Chairwoman Amy Klobuchar announced that the Senate Rules Committee will travel here to Georgia to hold a hearing on the state's new election law. That's the committee's first field hearing in 20 years. Kathy, what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's great. It isn't an unusual thing. Field hearings have been held before on any number of topics. I'm glad to see members of Congress getting out of D.C. and actually listening to real people talk about what their concerns are. Certainly nationally, we've got tons of issues, and I know we'll get around to talking a little bit more about the Supreme Court decision. But, having people talk about what the impact of some of these changes are to voting laws, the kind of evisceration of the Voting Rights Act and other things, it needs some real life context for members of Congress. So I will roll out the welcome for her and her committee when they come.
Phil, I know I got to let you weigh in on that one.
Well, the whole hearing is going to be a joke. It's supposed to be starting July 19th. Why is it? Because Senator Amy Klobuchar is an ultra-liberal. She doesn't obviously like Georgia's law. I know we're going to be talking about it in the next segment, but it was a great victory last Thursday that the U.S. Supreme Court said that the liberals just can't twist an interpretation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act into destroying election integrity laws like in Arizona and in Georgia. And so I think that the wind has really gone out of the sails of this hearing already with this excellent landmark Supreme Court decision that's reaffirming that states have a right to investigate fraud. In fact, I would challenge Klobuchar. Why don't you bring in some witnesses like Fulton County's poll worker Susie Voiles, who worked for 20 years. She witnessed fraud and mismanagement, and yet she was kicked out of monitoring the election by the Liberal Elections Board here in Fulton County. I would dare her to have witnesses that testify to alleged fraud.
All right, Kathy, do you have any response to Phil?
Well, listen, I worked in Washington. I know how to get people onto a panel for a hearing, and I think if there are Republicans who feel like the panel's not going to be independently selecting the right people, then they need to get to work with their, with their representatives to make sure that people who need to be heard get heard. Nobody should be afraid of the truth. Nobody should be afraid of facts. And I think if we allow people to say what they need to say and then fact check them, then, we'll just go with what we hear.
All right, we'll leave it there.
I hope the senator hears what Kathy said. I hope the senator hears that. Very good, Kathy. I'm with you.
I hear that, Georgia Gang has a very loyal following. I don't know if Senator Klobuchar is one of those, but who knows? All right, thank you guys. When we come back, the Supreme Court rules in favor of Arizona's new voting laws. What that could mean for Georgia's new law.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Thursday, as Phil mentioned, the Supreme Court upheld 2 voting laws in Arizona, one dealing with who can collect a voter's absentee ballot and the other throwing out any ballots cast in the wrong precinct. A lower court had struck down the laws, saying that they had a disproportionate effect on minority voters. But in his opinion, Justice Samuel Alito said voting being inconvenient does not make it unequal. Now, Phil, you're hearing that this could bode well for Georgia's new election law and any court challenges.
Yes, a lot of the legal experts I've talked to on both sides of the political fence say that the Justice Department's lawsuit that's been joined by the Democratic National Committee and these left-wing groups have really been dealt a serious blow. This is a landmark decision. It really, as I said earlier, it helps states have their election integrity laws, and you don't have the Justice Department having ultimate federal control here. So if there's discrimination, there's already ways to address that in the court system. But as I said earlier, this actually interprets Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act accurately. You don't have these liberal statisticians claiming that, wait a minute, this is not racially good. I think you're going to see the lawsuit just collapse in light of this landmark Supreme Court ruling.
Bobby, Phil mentioned the Voting Rights Act. People who disagree with this decision say that it really has weakened the Voting Rights Act. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it shines a light on the fact that this is an absolutely critical time to pass legislation at the federal level in Washington, specifically the compromise plan that Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, has gotten behind, that Stacey Abrams is supporting as well. Protecting the right to vote, not only here in Georgia, but around the country, is critically important to the health and well-being of our democracy. And anything that strips that away, to me, is not only doing damage to our people here, but to our country's institutions as well.
Martha, I want you to weigh in. Do you think this adds fuel to the fire to get maybe some federal voting laws passed?
No, I think it really strengthens the fact that the states are the ones that really control elections. And what we've seen, not only with the Supreme Court decision, but with lower court decisions, all the way back when voter ID was first challenged in Georgia, for that matter, this argument that inconvenience is not discrimination, that having to take time to go and vote is not discrimination. And this, to use a George Bush phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations, when the numbers that we've seen since ID has been put in place in Georgia have astronomically increased as far as minority voting. And it actually defies statistics, the levels of turnout that we've seen. And so we've seen that this security of elections, making it easy to vote and hard to cheat, has really made the turnout process much better. And people can say, well, it could have been better, but there's no way to measure could have been better. What we can measure is how good the election turnouts have been since the voter ID has been put in place in Georgia.
Kathy, I want you to weigh in on this.
I'd like to jump in. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just also state that Fair Fight Action is one of my clients, although my comments are my own. Let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the case, because I think it's important to understand what the Supreme Court did here. And one of them was to say, you've got to prove intent to discriminate, not just that the impact of what you've done discriminates. And so there were 2 things that were at issue here. One was the issue of letting third parties collect ballots versus having them come in through the mail or some other way. And then the other one was to throw out any ballots cast in the wrong precincts. Now, that might sound like a fairly innocuous kind of thing, but the decision really impacted Native Americans in Arizona who live on reservations really, really far from any place where they could cast, put something at a post office, because they don't get postal service there. So they have to drive 50 to 100 miles to get to a town center to cast their vote. And so having people collect those ballots is a really important thing. Same thing. You go to the wrong precinct, you think you're at the right one, they've closed yours down, they've changed it, and then suddenly you've got 30 minutes to drive 100 miles to cast your vote. So even if the intent wasn't to discriminate, it has made things very, very difficult for folks. So rather than, making sure that you're writing legislation or procedures that help those people get the ballots in, like having elections supervisors come and get those ballots at places that are closer to people who live in rural areas, areas, they're saying, no, nobody can do it at all. So, I do think we need legislation. I think we really need to look at how we are changing our democracy. Citizens United let corporations give vast sums of money to participate in politics. That's something needs to be changed. And frankly, redistricting and gerrymandering, again, bipartisan folks have messed this up. But as citizens, we really need to have competitive districts so that the people who represent us listen to us and find a way to compromise and do the work we need to have them do.
All right, thank you. Rudy Giuliani was back in Georgia this week to endorse Vernon Jones for governor. Martha, how much do you think that endorsement means at this point?
I think it's very difficult to measure. Rudy Giuliani has had lots of challenges over the last year or so, and Vernon Jones is I'd be surprised if he gets 20% in the primary. You see what is happening with Governor Kemp and his very large fundraising numbers is bouncing back with the base. I mean, I don't think it makes a difference, but he's gonna continue to talk about national issues. Meaning Vernon Jones talking about national issues instead of talking about what he's going to do for Georgia. And if I were advising him, I would tell him that's his greatest mistake.
I did want to ask Bobby, their news conference focused heavily on election integrity, as Martha alluded to, and also crime, which we've been seeing. Do you think those issues are going to carry through all the way to 2022?
Well, I think Rudy Giuliani's got a lot of chutzpah on the same week that he loses his law license to be parading around in Georgia, the very place that was the cause for him losing his law license for the lies he was telling the elections committees here that were looking into the 2020 presidential election. It's really sad, the fall from grace this guy has had. And frankly, you got to step back and look and see a former New York City mayor who has now decided to throw his lot in with the MyPillow guy. I don't see how this does anything for Vernon Jones, who's trying to primary a sitting Republican governor, and I don't see how this does anything for Rudy Giuliani. He should probably be focusing on himself right now.
All right, thank you. We will leave it right there. Coming up, winners and losers. We'll be right back.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Phil, you got all decked out for the 4th of July, so I'm going to let you go first this week.
Well, that's right. I hope everybody's a winner during our Independence Day weekend. One of my winners, too, is a very prominent lawyer and lobbyist who passed away at age 66, and that's Pete Robinson of Columbus, Georgia. He was also a former state lawmaker, and he was at one time Senate President pro tem, and he was with some prominent law firms, first Troutman Sanders and then King and Spalding. Also, I've got a loser. It's a DeKalb County Chief Judge Asha Jackson. Believe it or not, and I think I should give a little background, political parties choose Board of Elections members around the state. Well, this judge just arbitrarily didn't like a Republican that was picked and just kicked him off the board. And she cited, and this is crazy, she cited, I got a lot of emails and phone calls against this guy. I think that political parties ought to pick their people and be left alone, not some biased judge saying who should be a party member on the election board or not.
All right, Kathy, let's go to you.
My winner this week is the newfound Georgia Association for Infant and Childhood Mental Health. It's a coalition of organizations, and we're joining 31 other states that are bringing more resources and coordination to family and childhood mental health issues. It's much needed, as we all know, after the pandemic, and I just wish them great success. My loser for the week is former Governor Sonny Perdue, who continues to find ways to make money off of public service and manage to buy some property from an organization, a company, Archer Daniels Midland, who he had significant work to do with as agriculture secretary. Both he and his cousin David Perdue, managed to turn public service into a cash cow, and I hope we don't see him at the Board of Regents anytime soon.
All right, Martha, you're up.
Well, my winner this week is Cole Muzio and the folks at the Frontline policy group. They changed their name this week, and they announced that they're going to do great work in Georgia. And also the United States of America. We've had a very tough year, but contracts like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence are not for when times are good. They are for when times are bad, and they stood the test of time. We protected this country. The Constitution stood and took care of us, and the rights of the states have been upheld. So I think it's been a very good year, and happy birthday, America.
All right, and last but certainly not least, Bobby.
I'm going to echo Martha here. I'm going to skip a loser since it is an Independence Day, and I'm going to celebrate we the people of the United States of America as the winners. However imperfect our union may be, we still live in the greatest country on earth, and we should be thankful every day for it, and we should be making sure that we're spending the time we do have here in this country to make it better, more just, more fair, and more equal for everybody so that everybody can enjoy what is a beautiful, beautiful holiday weekend.
All right, thank you. My winner is the panelists. Thank you for letting me fill in this week. And for all of your positive comments. I really love that when we get some positive comments and don't always take the opportunity to pick losers. So thank you guys so much. And I believe Lori should be back next week. So thanks for bearing with me. And I will say, last time I filled in, I had people say, you guys they're so much more polite when it's a fill-in. So I appreciate you guys, but although it's fun when you talk over each other from time to time. So thank you for making my job easy this 4th of July. So y'all have a great holiday weekend. And thank you guys so much for joining us. We will be back here on the Georgia Gang next Sunday morning.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.